So as I said, I'm going to separate this example into two. First, I'm going to create the navigation so that I can dynamically load the fragment. Second, the fragment itself. So how to create the fragment. So let me create my simple fragment example. Those things remains, so I'm not going to modify anything. As usual, I'm going to go to a blank activity. Let it be whatever default it creates. I'm starting my emulator. Usually fragments are considered some sort of advanced type. So ultimately we are dealing an advanced part of an Android now. Uh, it may be like without the fragment. Without having the fragment concept at all, you can still create a wonderful projects. It's not something compulsory, but fragments helps you to keep the code much modular, and you can reuse various views or whatever it is required. You don't need to create anything multiple times. Remember, when we create multiple activity, we have to think about sending the data, receiving the data. There are various things we have to work on. uh, Still maintaining modularity mean we have to see the same layout could be reused in across activity, but still fragment will give you a much better solution than the activities having a multiple activities in place. Okay. Let me have my emulator start first. It's a slightly time taking process. I should have started much before. It's ready now. Let it load for some time, so we'll go ahead and create. We'll just start working on the layout or changes so that we can create a navigation, a common navigation for all the fragments. So one of the benefit I was talking about, keeping one single activity, defining all the navigations or menus or action bars or specific thing becomes common across all the views. So if I load everything through fragments, if I keep a different activity, I would end up creating separate action bars, separate menus across all the activities. I cannot keep a common menu system. So since we are going to use a fragment, let us create some sort of common fragment, navigation technique. The one I'm going to talk about, drawer layout. So let me first clean this thing. Certain rules I will say, make sure you pay attention to it. There are a lot of do's and don'ts are there across when you use the fragments. Okay. First thing, uh, this is nothing to do with the fragment. I'm trying to work on the navigation, which may be helpful for the fragment. Without this, also the fragment could be still created. The first one we are going to need is a drawer layout, so that a kind of a layout could be inflated. It's not the inflation again. I don't want to use. Can be brought into screen as I swipe through. So, for example, I can from the edge I can simply swipe and I can bring that drawer and visible in the activity. It's similar to HTML5 one we had on the top. We as you create something floats on the top. Similar thing. So first we'll create that layout. That's slightly again a tricky one. It's called drawer suggestion drawer won't come. Let me get it. Okay. I need because it is defined in the support package. Just let me find what is drawer layout package where it is residing. So it is residing in Android support. Okay, let me copy that. The layout, actually the drawer layout is a support package. Mean it is added later point of time when first time Android introduced it was not having such a layout. So that's the reason certain thing having a support prefix mean these kind of classes were added later point of time for a higher version. Later, Android worked on some support package, and so that higher version API is also made available to a lower version also. So those things you may identify certain classes having the same name but having a different imports. So I'm going to need this layout to create a navigation for draw layout navigation for my fragments. So I'm going to need this one. I don't remember the path. I'm going to make this one. Sometimes suggestion won't come, so never mind. Let me keep things straight. Okay. So this drawer layout should only contain two views inside. Remember, two layouts. One being something hidden, which comes only when the user swipe from the edges, either from left or right. Another one, a placeholder for a fragment. So only two allowed. The first one, a placeholder mean it would be better to use a frame layout. So okay, let me copy them. These guys are pretty annoying today. I'm going to define an ID for it. So I'm going to say fragment holder because it's just a holder. It's a empty. We are going to dynamically load the fragment when required. It's like you may still assume like a photo frame without a view or without a photo, just a frame, and we will load them dynamically properly. Another one, I'm going to need a list view. This list view, I'm going to use it as a drawer, which will only be visible when the user simply swipe. Um, See, the suggestions are not coming, but never mind. Because it's a special type class, the studio is facing some sort of difficulty to give you a choice. You really don't need to worry about that. Say navigation list, something. I would prefer some kind of a gray background so that because we'll identify something floating. I prefer this one. Kind of HTML color code. You may still refer some sort of example. This order also very important. The placeholder layout should come first. The drawer one, which is going to float, should come next. So remember, this is going to be floated and it is going to be set hidden at the beginning. So I'm going to keep the gravity. Suggestions are killing. There is one way to get the suggestion. I just created a dummy layout here to get back suggestions. There's quite a bit of technique here. So gravity should be set to start. Mean at the very edge, it is actually kept. Gravity mean the direction or left, right, top, center, some sort of thing. So I'm going to keep the gravity to a starting position. Mean it's very start picture. It is kept in the very beginning of your layout. I'll show you how this thing's going to look. Let me put it back here, and of course move this. I don't think I'm going to need any suggestion hereafter. If at all required, I'll use this dummy layout to do my job. I'm going to move this. Okay. So I have two views or two layouts. Typically, instead of views, I can say layouts because layout can still contain some sort of views inside. Preferably one frame layout, another one reserved for your something navigation drawer, which is hidden. In this case, this list, I'm going to keep some list of items so that it is going to behave as if a menus for my activity, and it is having the layout gravity set to start. I have made sure the entire wrapper, that is the layout, is called drawer layout, and it is available in the support package. And the support package should be given with the full path because we are still using lower end API to support, so you have to add this. It means API level 4 onwards it could add the drawer layout. Okay, you can find here special characters. Okay. So as usual, activity main is there. Okay, so let me run first. Just need to make sure without error these things work. Things goes on. Okay. Oh my god. Yeah. See, I can bring something. So far, nothing. But this drawer layout, bringing some list view. List view doesn't have any items so far. That's the reason it's empty. When I move from, or when I try to swipe from the edge of the screen, remember I've set it to start. I need to do it. Yeah. So a kind of a drawer as you just open and close. So has been added. It is because of the layout called drawer layout. Drawer layout, it should be taken from a support package and define as usual. Make sure your any declaration files being kept on the top, and drawer layout recommended to keep only two layouts, one being a frame layout reserved for our fragments to load, and second being any layout which is going to be floated from the left or right direction. If you keep layout gravity to end, mean this drawer layout will start from the uh, extreme right direction. For example, you can bring the drawer layout from this direction. So start and end, only two parameters are accepted as far as the layout gravity. So if you are using drawer layout, make sure you use only these two, one for fragment, another one for floating layout. It could be any layout along with the list view. List view is one of a preferred one because I can maintain a kind of a menu system over there, items. But it could be any layout. And the hierarchy also very important. A frame layout or any layout which is going to be used for fragment should be loaded first, and the second one which is going to be floated. The floating thing should be at the end, that's it. If you keep it at the beginning, you'll may not get the event listeners to work properly. But still, okay. Now we have added something, but how do I tell the user there is such a menu exist? User may not be knowing, so we need to do some sort of adjustment to help the user. There is such a floating drawer exist. So better I put some sort of hamburger menu here. So when the user click on this, the dryer automatically comes. Then he'll realize, okay, there is some sort of a menu system exists. To make that, of course, these things something to do with the action bar. Few things I need to do for that. Let me give an ID for my drawer layout. It's making terrible. Make it as a drawer layout itself, whatever. So let us start initializing drawer layout. Make sure drawer layout always you import from support package, because that's the one we have added over there. So usual stuff. Initialize the drawer layout. Okay, this is only for initialization, something I am going to do. Before that, let me get access to my action bar. Action bar also should be taken from a support package, not the other action bar you are seeing with the same name, but it is having a different package system. Because our device is going to support the lower end version also. I mean, we are already a couple of emulators running in the lower end version. So make sure the support version called Android.support v7 app is used. I mean, the import is used. And the instance also should be captured get support action bar. Okay, let me make that hamburger menu visible first. First thing, action bar set. This one we quite often use, but this will put some different thing. Before, let me see it, what it is actually putting. Set display home as up enabled. The keyword is up. Make sure in every stage, better we test it so that we understand what are the changes being done. Remember, I am just preparing a navigation system for my fragment. I yet to do a fragment. Okay, so this is actually putting a kind of a back button kind of looking like, but this is not what I wanted. To have that hamburger menu set display, be very careful. So it's going to have a similar name. Set display show home enabled. Suggestions. Just before I added set display show home enabled, what it is actually putting, let's see. Yet to see, but hasn't made any changes. Okay, I'm going to need some more. Okay, I need to sync this drawer layout along with my navigation bar. So to do that, for example, once I click this, the navigation drawer should automatically come, and of course as I click back should get closed. So I need to sync or synchronize my action bar back button, so that along with the drawer layout, so that clicking that also open the drawer and close the drawer, rather than, of course, still the user can go to the edges and bring the drawer layout. So you have to do something here. First thing, the drawer going to need some sort of event listener. Drawer layout set drawer listener. Someone has to listen what is actually happening to a drawer listener. I mean a drawer, so that when the drawer getting opened, when the drawer getting closed, that drawer listener I'm going to synchronize with the action bar. So first thing, I need to I need a drawer listener. That drawer listener actually action bar drawer toggle. This is actually a kind of a listener. First thing I need to have this initialized. I need to see what all the argument it takes. Okay, couple of things. Uh, Four arguments at least needed. One is instance of an activity, nothing but the context. Second, the drawer layout where this toggle, a particular one is going to open and close, going to listen. Some text actually, some integer. Okay, let me do first this drawer layout. Two string actually, string IDs actually needed. This is for accessibility mode for the person who is having disability. They cannot read the hamburger menu to understand that time. If such a accessibility mode enabled, instead of hamburger menu, it will display some text. So that text actually should be kept called through the string file. That's why it is an integer format. What I'm going to do, just open drawer some text, say open. Now where you look, you are going to see this text anyway. Post drop some text. So r dot, sorry, I made it maximized. So open drawer. What's the text I gave? I don't remember. Sorry, problem is actually it is not ID. Okay. Okay. This listener actually, this draw layout is going to take. So drawable listener mean it actually knows the status of your drawer layout, like what time it is open, what time it gets closed, and that should be synchronized using post. Okay, that synchronized part will come a little later, but anyway I'll keep it. On post create mean when post create usually called, this is one of a life cycle method again I'm right now introducing. I just need to make sure the create is done. On create, I'm getting the confirmation at one point, like in on resume itself, but on create gives me a guarantee that my objects are created, mean my view objects are created. So that is especially useful if you are having, if you need to maintain certain data when the user shift between landscape and portrait format the phone. For example, a phone uh, can have a different layout or different layout technique for landscape and portrait. So user may switch between landscape and portrait. When he switches between the landscape and portrait, an activity is actually recreated because different layout may be there to render it. In that case, I can keep some data. For example, user is filling the form, he's typing something, suddenly he changes the orientation of his phone. He should start from where what he's actually typed, but when activity is recreated, data may disappear. To prevent that option, I can actually, for this bundle is actually is there for that. In such a case, user shift between the orientation, certain data I can, for few millisecond I can back up and I can get it back, and that few millisecond actually the time taken to shift between the portrait and landscape mode. I have one example for it to talk about it in detail. So anyway, as of now, just to understand, I'm going to need a post create. I may need this guy as a slightly global object. Okay, I think the trouble layout, let me see 1 second. It's going to synchronize its state. Actually, I haven't done anything to synchronize app. So, but before that, let me see what are all the code changes being done. The synchronized state, this is what I was talking about. So that the hamburger menu or back button something gets clicked, the drawer can be opened closed automatically. One change being, right now it is not showing as a back button, it is showing the hamburger menu now. But it's not working. But at least the menu system got slightly changed. I need to handle the event actually. In fact, I just detect the status of a drawer layout, but not actually triggering the drawer layout open or closed. This drawer toggle will listen when the state of a toggle, I'm sorry, the drawer is actually opened or closed. It can listen the open and close, but actually cannot open and close unless you call it automatically so that it can be open. So let me see. For that I need to make this guy as a global, because drawer layout is actually having a method called open. Pardon. Okay, so this drawer layout I made it global. Remember, these action bar menu hamburger stuffs are option menus, so we need to detect the status. I think this settings. Okay, this is for the settings menu. Let me add some more. LSF, IDB, Android. It's actually a home button. So I'm going to, if drawer layout is drawer open, okay, it needs some sort of view inside. Okay, I'll have that also ready before. The drawer layout contains a view. In our example, a list view, yeah. So a list view actually contains. So I need to have that initialized first. So maybe time here to initialized list view. I make it as a navigation list, some nav list or whatever name. Let me initialize. Okay, I'm going to need it as a global one. This view. I can attach a value with the array adapter or whatever adapter I may think of, but before doing that, let me start synchronizing. So let me first, if a drawer is already open, this drawer is open, we have to close. If a drawer is closed, we have to open it back. So it's going to toggle between them. The view is actually being the nav list, whether the nav list is open. If the nav list is open, close the drawer. Yes. Open the drawer. just a toggle. So if a drawer is already open, it will close it. If it is closed, it will open it back. So whenever the action bar menu button, home button is clicked, nothing but the hamburger menu, when you click, the drawer layer would be either opened or closed. Let me run. Load. Let me run it to make sure. Okay. Now if you see, this guy gets controlled multiple times. So now if you notice, the action bar synchronize the status with the drawer layout. So user can click on the hamburger menus, bring this drawer layout. Of course, he can swipe to get it close. So anything happens to a drawer layout, your action bar is already syncing or synchronized. So if I dynamically open the layout through the swipe, that also the hamburger menu changes. And this home button and back button, if you notice the difference, this is display home as up enabled, the back look like. This is actually the one hamburger menu. This is coming because set display show home enabled. There is a small difference, the up keyword is missing. Make sure you put both. So once the user click on it, the drawer layer gets open. When the user click it back, that's why the toggle we have written. So if it is open, it will close, or close open. Does shift between these two. So in this place, I can keep something and give a uniform layout across all my fragments. Remember, this is the place, the whole place, actually the frame layout is there, and we are reserving this place for our fragments to go to. So a simple navigation has been created. A couple of things we have done before. Before adding the items to my list view, I'll just explain. The drawer layout is a support layout which can contain two layouts. In such a case, the two primarily may be one reserved for a frame layout. I don't see any other alternate because the frame layout is a placeholder layout. Unless you directly display one single fragment, frame layout is the ideal choice. Second being any layout or a list view, because you can have a linear layout inside, you can keep the list view, it's up to your choice. But you can directly put the list view also. But the second one should always contain the layout gravity set to start. Only two allowed. If you keep more than that, make sure that is going to be used for your toggling. For example, a drawer layout in such a case can have one more. Let me see, list to two. This is, remember, this is different view. This having a layout gravity set to end. Let me see. We are syncing the state with the action bar for only one list view, but whereas I have another list view added that won't sync with your action bar, but it can be added. But if you are adding one more view or layout, make sure it is for drawer layout, so that it only gets visible when this one it's coming from this direction. Actually, it's syncing. Okay, anyway. I think it's moved. Actually, overridden, I think. Okay, it's here. So this guy sync with having a list view ID set to start, and one is already added that is actually coming from this end direction. So if you are keeping multiple one, make sure that is only for your drawer purpose, but not for the visible purpose. Not to confuse too much at this point. We just keep one single list view and having an ID. So in this case, it has been set to start. So a drawer layout, a recommended views are two. One being a frame layout, second being used for drawer purpose, which is kept as a layout gravity either set to start or end. So these two have been kept, and I need to make sure drawer layout initialized having an ID, and I also attach a drawer layout toggle, for example, which will listen the drawer listener, I mean drawer changes, so that this drawer listener can be synchronized with your action bar. So it can be synchronized using on post create method. Make sure you synchronize whenever your create is done successfully, so that action bar will synchronize with your drawer layout. So to make the drawer, sorry, action bar to display the hamburger menu, first thing you have to make sure show set display home enabled set to true, and the second one set display home as up enabled true. This will put the hamburger menu, this will put the back button, or when the drawer is open it will put the back button kind of thing. Remember, the hamburger menu, it won't be visible unless you call on post create. For example, if I do not call on post create synchronize state, it won't of course the hamburger menu at all won't be visible. So it depends uh, on post create, that so that the action bar understand, okay, it is listening the drawer layout, so based on that it will put the hamburger menu, otherwise it won't put the hamburger menu. Okay, so this is for our standard navigation practice for fragments. If you're all loading multiple fragments, we still want to keep the same menu system. I have to add the menu, in fact. Let me create a array list. And make it as a relevant naming. This you already know. I'm going to use a array adapter. Let me add some contents. New array. I had to create the fragments though, but I just keep the menus ready for me. Maybe I keep this as so nav list set adapter. Okay, I had to create the array adapter again. Text layout, I am going to use the default one, I mean system resource one. Android dot layout simple list item 1, whatever what we think, and the data, which is nothing but nav array, something like that. So I'm going to set this adapter. Set. Pardon? Where? Oh, sorry. Fine. So adapter has been added. So, and we also going to need a event listener to, as user click on the item, so that we can load a different fragment. So there are various ways, but let me keep it simple. On, so implements item click listener. This is for our list view, so that we can detect the errors. So this suggestion sometimes doesn't come. Okay, it is telling on item click menu should be implemented. Let me implement manually. So I think we have almost 5 and 6, so totally 6 items we have, or there's going to be a position starting from 0 to 5 expected. So let me put a switch statement. Okay, 0, sorry. We'll come back to this guy a little later maybe, but anyway, I'll have the switch cases put reserved for me. Three, four, I think we need one more. Okay, so we just have them reserved. So based on the position, it is going to execute and will attempt to load a fragment or to be coming fragment, yet to add fragment. Okay. First we'll test it, how things goes on. Accordingly, if any changes required, we'll do. No. Okay, now we have a list. So assumption is something when the user click on any item, we are going to dynamically load a fragment in the frame layout. To make that happen, I think the drawer does not get dismissed, but it's still good, but we can dismiss it. As soon as user pick the fragment, sorry, list item, we'll close the drawer after the switch statement executed. So drawer layout, close drawer, next. So this will be ideal if as I click the item, the drawer automatically dismisses and the fragment would be loaded. So it's not doing still. Oh, see, this is a stupidity again. I had to attach the nav list to event listener. Set on item click listener. So after this only it will start listening the events or item click events. Okay, we just implemented the interface, but we forgot to connect it with the listener. This is itself a type of frag. Loaded, I don't know. Okay. So as I click the item, the drawer gets dismissed so that it gives a room for the frame layout to get displayed, so we can dynamically handle the view here. I think we can do some more customized still. For example, I want to retain the selection. For example, when the user click on fragment 2, the fragment 2 may be displaying, but when the user click on it, if the fragment 2 is still highlighted, the user will understand he is right now seeing the fragment 2. So if you could maintain some sort of selection in the list view, it would be more useful. To make that happen, first I need to tell my, maybe just before or here itself, nav list set choice mode means single choice at a time can be selected. It is actually default selection, you don't need to provide it, but list view can also have a multiple choices. So I'm just going to give a choice mode single. I'm going to make this one. There is a built-in layout called simple list item activated. This will retain the selection as the user click on it, or I'll show you how. But I'm not sure this will work on your emulator version running 8. I mean API level 8. But at least your navigation drawer will work. So up to that, at least we'll be fine. So I think you could have, may have noticed, see, it's retaining the selection. So anytime user can see, okay, which item has got selected. So that particular fragment we can load it. So this menu remembers, okay, which item has got selected and which is going to be loaded at this point. So this would be pretty helpful if I keep it. Usually a design technique of a fragment with the navigation drawer, what we will do, we will load the fragment, the very first fragment by default. Mean always the home is first selected. So we have to make sure by default home is selected, so that that particular fragment is loaded. For that, again, I need to do some sort of changes. Let me write a method set or load default frag. Default selection, we'll keep it. Default selection is also not good. Load selection, we'll give a integer, any item which gets selected. So the default selection is going to be 0th one. So nav list. This is style, again I need to find. Set selection. I'm expecting an argument which is containing 2. Set item checked. I position and keep it true. So by default, load selection going to be 0. So if a specific item is clicked, the selection will be retained, and of course automatically would be retained, but by default we want to select the first item. I think okay, we'll do it later. In this case, we notice the by default the home is selected, so we can go ahead and load a first fragment. So here, the very first fragment we could still have it loaded by default. So the user can still move between them and keep the fragments loaded accordingly. So this is actually for Navigation preparation, for that we can load the fragment dynamically. But before adding the fragment itself, you have to do certain adjustment to your activity so that a common menu system could be created using drawer layout. Remember, the drawer layout is required only when you want to keep a common menu system across your different views. If you do not have such a requirement, you can very well skip. You don't need to keep these things. You can go ahead and directly load the fragment, whatever it is needed. But if you want to maintain a common menu system across all your view, it is recommended to keep a drawer layout and synchronize its state with action bar so that the hamburger menu can be put, and the menus, based on the menu clicks, the fragments could be loaded dynamically. So this is a simple idea of loading the fragment based on the items clicked. Okay, now let us get into a fragment itself. Android Studio makes it pretty easy. There is a option to create a fragment when you once you right click on the package. There is right click, if you put new, there is an option for a fragment. You can very well use it, or you can still create from the scratch. Creating fragment does not require any manifest registration still, but let's see what it actually puts. I give frag one something. This all blah blah stuff, interface, fragment factory. I'll just have it disabled. We will add them now. I mean, we'll understand first, and then we'll add it manually instead of this code do everything. Interface mean, that's what I was talking about. The fragment want to communicate between the activity and do something. The interface we needed. It will put the default interface. I mean, it will create an interface for you and have it ready for you. But we'll have to understand first. So we will create the interface when needed. Otherwise, we'll just leave it. So I just uncheck both, and I'm going to create my fragment. It will also create a layout. It actually takes some time, so let it finish the job, and I'll get back my layout. I mean perspective. Okay, my fragment got created. Uh, Remember, the class extends fragment. Make sure your imports, this won't be visible. Check the import, the fragment is loaded from the support package. If not, you will have a compatibility issue with the lower end. But since I use the Android Studio to decide, it has put the right import already for me. So it just created a class and extends fragment, that's it. And it has a constructor, and it has one method written for me on create. That's what I was talking about. Fragment contains its own lifecycle, but slightly different than activity, but it's still wrapped inside the activity lifecycle. But to make it simple, it has on attach as a starting part, on detach as a ending part. It's, you may still connect it with, it's like on create, on, it is like on destroy of your activity, but it is not activity in this case. It is on attach and on detach, but it's still having on create and other stuff. Of course, there is a on create is still there, on destroy is still there, but just before on create, it has one more life cycle called on attach, and just before this, just after destroy, it also have one more life cycle called on detach. It's pretty obvious. On attach is called when this fragment get attached to an activity. On detach is called if the fragment is removed from the activity. So within the activity, if this particular fragment is loaded, the very first lifecycle method it is going to call is on attach. After that only creation of the fragment will happen, and all the stuff will go on. But in that also, on create has been separated into two here. Not only on create just a creation, but the view is actually getting added at this point only. But usually in activity, after on create, we'll simply attach the set content view and go add the XML directly. But in this case, we cannot do it. We will have to depend on one other fragment lifecycle method called on create view, because that's give me the instance of inflator so that I can attach another XML file and of course inflate that in an activity. So here only you need to you need to inflate your layouts, or it is equivalent to set content view of your activity. So to make it simplified, what I'm going to do, on attach and on detach as two extreme methods. Uh, on create is for activity created. If you really want to know that whether on create of your activity what happened, mean that method is actually there on activity created. This will give you an instance of your activities on create if you really need. Otherwise you can skip it, you don't need to implement this. Not to get confused, this is on create of your activity, but this is on create of your fragment. But rather than detecting here, I can start from on attach and consider my fragment is closed in on detach. On attach, it's the moment your fragment gets added to a activity. On create, after attaching, your fragment gets created. But created mean only the placeholder got created, but the view is going to be rendered only at this point. Okay, then you may argue why the on create is there. On create, if you want to have your objects which need initialization, or your activity sending some sort of objects, that can be captured at this point. Mean bundles. If any parsable bundles your activity sends to this fragment can be captured here. And this is where your view is getting initialized. Remember, here data would be ready but not the view. So view is initialized at this point only. If you really want to detect the on activity create, for example, you want to detect the on create of your activity which is happening as soon as your activity created, but still would be notified to a fragment later only, because fragment is added only later point time of your activity. So why this particular method may be useful is if your fragment has to recreate its view when the landscape and portrait mode is being changed. For that point, this particular on activity create method would be helpful. Otherwise, there is no use of this method, because that bundle saved instance stuff which will have some sort of extra data when your device moves from landscape to portrait. Till the time, this is not useful at all. So, but I just kept it for your understanding. And on destroy, it's of course your activity gets destroyed, and on detach, sorry, or it's not activity, your fragment get destroyed, but this will give you a clear confirmation that your fragment is completely removed from the activity itself. So subsequent methods. So one method just ahead and before the create, and one method it is there after the destroy. So that's the only difference your fragment is going to contain. Remember, it is everything starts after activity is loaded only, because activity lifecycle is a wrapper lifecycle. So when activity lifecycle on create is called, if you are trying to load the fragment, then it will start from on attach, on create view, or if activity has some sort of bundle that it will call here, otherwise on destroy and detach, and as it goes. Of course, on resume, on pause is also applicable to this, but that could be controlled by the activity itself, so we don't need to worry about this point. So this is a activity, say a fragment life cycle, and this is where we need to study. Okay.
What is the bundle in non-activity create?
That bundle comes from activity.
What is it?
It's a passable object. It could be anything. We are not setting anything, so I don't know. If I set, I may have some value. So that I will be setting when if I'm changing the view between the portrait and landscape, but I had to come to that part, so we'll see that later. Okay, let me load, create a fragment with a different view. This already contains some layout, seems to be this one. So it has created a kind of view. Something is happening, but let me see. Internal error. It has a frame layout again and something. Okay, let's come. Okay, it just having some sort of blank fragment, some sort of text, I think. Yeah, here. So how to load this fragment? It just have something created for me, but I later I may create, go ahead and add some sort of complex views. But how to load it at this point so that we can go ahead on the fragments in detail. So I'll just load it, then I'll leave it for our next session to come back to it in detail, because adding further points may confuse the navigation drawer, because the one I wanted to see, first you make your layouts ready so that the fragment could be loaded. So not the fragment itself is very important at this point. I want you to create the navigation, nothing but the navigation drawer ready for it. So I kept one single fragment, which I'm going to load only when the fragment 1 is called. May not be loading other fragments. So how to load it, that we will see now. So this is where I'm going to load the fragment. That's why I kept this method. Few things you are going to need. First one, a manager class, fragment manager. That's also should be from the support package import. Support fragment manager, and another object called fragment transaction. This is where you're going to load or remove, add, or you're going to do some transaction with the fragments. So the fragment transaction should be initialized. That can be captured using fragment manager dot begin transaction. So this fragment transaction object having the capability to add, remove all the fragments whenever needed. So I'm going to make this as a global one. So whenever an item is loaded, right now I only have one, that's why I'll be putting a if statement to make sure 0th item, sorry, I'll make it just one, fragment 1. Initialize your fragment. The fragment initialized. Now use your fragment transaction to replace any fragment which is there in your frame layout. So we need an ID of our frame layout. The frame layout is having an ID called fragment holder, I think, yes, and your fragment instance. And you're done with that, fragment transaction commit. So when the user click on the button 1 having an index 1, will load this fragment, and this is possible using the object called fragment transaction. And this fragment transaction will replace your frame layout with this fragment. For example, you have to understand slightly. Let me go back to the activity main. This is where the frame layout I have kept. So this frame layout having an ID called fragment holder. This frame layout is a placeholder layout. Mean right now it is having nothing. So there is no layouts inside. Frame layout does not have any guidance to the view. Usually frame layout consider for dynamically loading any views on inside the frame layout. Like you can imagine your empty photo frame. Now you want to load a photo here, then two things are possible. Add a photo along with the one which is already existing, or replace the any existing photo and put a new one. So I'm using in this case a replace method. So where it is here. I'm using replace so that the previous one will be removed and a new one could be added. This is essentially would be nice because the any fragment which is previously there would be removed and a new one could be added. So in this case, the fragment transaction helps me to replace a fragment which is already there. Right now, nothing is there, but if it is already there, which will remove and add this particular fragment which I'm initialized. Remember, I'm initializing the fragment as usual as a standard Java object with a new keyword. And finally, you need to commit, otherwise it won't work. Let me see. You may go ahead and create multiple fragments like this and populate your if else statement and see how things goes on. I may have a time, just 10 minutes there. So this one actually I'm expecting to work. Oh, sorry, I'm not even calling this method particularly. Sorry, this is actually position. I think switch case itself is not required since we moved that thing into load selection. But anyway, let's see. If you notice, this particular fragment has got loaded. If you see the text is displaying here, hello blank fragment, something like that. But we are not doing anything because right now I'm loading only one fragment. It's already committed now, so that's why it's showing error. So I'll do one thing. I'll create multiple fragments by copy from here. Fragment 2. That's the reason I don't create this. It takes time. We rename it. Okay. Another fragment. I'll make this as a home fragment, the first fragment. That factory stuff I added, I think I need to remove stuff. Okay, so I'm going to have a different text for these fragments to display, so that I'll identify which fragment has got loaded. Yes. You need to go for prayer today.
Yes.
Just I'll be finishing with this itself. So okay, just added some text so that I'll identify these fragments are loaded. I need to modify the layouts of the specific fragment as well because these guys have created various fragments. With that strings. So I'll modify all. So gravity to center. One, two. Here is. Okay, so each will display the specific text at the center so that we'll at least identify this fragment is loaded. Okay, a few changes I need to do since I'm going to use the load selection method to load it, so I don't need this one. You give a position directly. So now I have a multiple transaction coming in. Okay, there's one way to do that. I'll move this guy. I can manage. Okay, I think it's not needed. You see, if any error comes, we'll decide about it. The switch case actually needed here. Identify which fragment should be loaded. I copy from the previous code itself. So I'm going to move it here. Okay. The home fragment we have here. So these fragments will be loaded as I move through the items. So in every occurrences, it will replace the existing fragment. That's why we can safely use a replace. Let me see how things goes on. Doing something else. This poem fragment. I attached all the factory kind of methods. I'll do one thing. I'll just clean up the code. Factory stuff. We'll add it once as we understand these things. The argument bundling, everything is happening here. Listener stuff. Okay, just cleared it. This ADM I opened for my debugging purpose, but anyway, I identified the error. Okay, the first fragment loaded, that's why it is containing home. As I move between, I think it's now error. Okay. Illegal state exception caused by some other way. I don't see any errors. Okay, something goes on the on item click. Commit. Oh, commit already called. I think that transaction, I need to have a separate instance. Okay, try to create that. Okay, so any attempt to load your fragment, you should have a separate transaction initialized using the fragment manager. What I'll do, make the fragment manager also global. So every time I begin my transaction, then this will make sure every time get access to a fragment transaction, then I start doing it. Okay, now my fragments are getting loaded. Sorry, fourth I haven't added anything, so that will give an error because I partially completed. Rest of the part I haven't complete. So let me reopen the code. So the fragments are loading dynamically between. So up to this alone I have loaded, the rest I haven't added, that's why the error is coming. Only 3 fragment I have loaded. So any attempt to call them will give you an error. So I would advise you to create as many as fragment based on your list view. Accordingly, you load them and have an instance of a begin transaction at every instance and load them whenever necessary. So these fragment can be dynamically loaded and replace the existing one from your frame layout. Before that, I want you to create the navigation first, then think about adding the fragment. Anyway, tomorrow if you are coming, you can work on. Uh, Today, at least you make sure you complete up to the navigation drawer so that this particular view is created with the hamburger menu. This floating layout appears and with the multiple selection. And this should sync with your action bar so that this layout, when it gets opened, the action bar menu system also changes accordingly. So this drawer layout can be called through the action bar button or by directly swiping from edge of your phone screen, since the layout gravity has been set to start. After that, you can go ahead and create a fragment and load it dynamically. But still, if at all you are doing, try to understand the fragment lifecycle. If not, of course, Monday I'll give one more recap. But that time we will see the fragment part in detail. We'll have a complex view generated here. From there, we will do it. Okay. So that's it for today's hands-on.